There's been a long learning trajectory. And I mentioned earlier the importance of dialogical person-to-person learning. When I was living in Seattle, I knew like Zippo about multiculturalism, ethnic studies, and over a period of, I was first getting to know the kids I was working with, and then I decided I wanted to stay in Seattle even though the jobs weren't there, they were out in the suburbs. But I didn't want to go to the suburbs because from working with the kids, I was beginning to change. So I stayed living in Seattle and got to be friends with some African American educators who were also working for Seattle Public Schools. And this was while Seattle Public Schools was undergoing voluntary desegregation, and so some of them were working with the desegregation program. And it was partly having just trusting relationships with people, and me being the kind of person where sometimes I listen a lot more than I speak. Sometimes people will think I'm really quiet, but a lot of times I'm listening and learning. So I was just learning from people that I had gotten to know about really racism, everyday reality that people of color, and particularly African American people, were grappling with in their own everyday lives. And I remember getting into discussions sometimes where I would say something that would show my own ignorance, and then people just kind of explaining to me, well, that's not how things work for us. And over a period of time, I gradually underwent a kind of a re-education, and as I realized how much I didn't know, then I started voluntarily doing my own kind of ethnic studies reading. So I spent 1 year or so as a beginning teacher finding what at the time were some of the African American classics and beginning to read them. The autobiography of Malcolm X and some of Richard Wright's work and stuff. And then finding some of the works in Chicano studies. And it was somewhere around there that I read Rudy Acuña's Occupied America. And so these were, in a way, it was a little bit hit and miss what I would pick, but it was this beginning of both interpersonal as well as scholarly re-education. But I hadn't actually thought of myself as working in ethnic studies. I mean, I was just sort of this teacher just trying to learn stuff until I had kind of gone into multicultural education through my doctoral studies working with Carl Grant, and was at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside, which was my second academic job. And one of the people who we hired to work with, it was at the time called Minority Student Services, an African American linguist, who he and I were having a conversation early on when he got there. And he said, this campus really needs an ethnic studies program. And I said, yeah, it sure does. So he and I just sort of mapped out what ethnic studies would look like at the college level. And I was drawing on my interest in multicultural education, but it was like I didn't realize how much I knew by then, and how much I, just through reading and kind of, and so we put together this ethnic studies program, and then he was the first director of it, he left, and then I was the next director of it. And then I was like, okay, but my job is really in teacher education, and here I am directing ethnic studies, and so then I had got somebody else to take over after me. But that was probably where I first started seeing, well, yeah, okay, I guess I do have feet in ethnic studies, even though the work I've been doing is really multicultural teacher education. And that work never really stopped. Most recently, I kind of, it's sort of like ethnic studies as a field, I think, has kind of grabbed me and said, okay, you're one of us, and here's how we want to use you. So the review that I did for the NEA, they contacted me and said, we need somebody who will review the research on the impact of ethnic studies on students. And it was actually Jose Lara it was his idea to have a review done. I'm still not real sure how they got my name, but oh well. I said, yeah, okay, I'll do it if what you mean by ethnic studies is that it directly addresses racism and colonialism, and it's not just, teaching everybody how to get along. And NEA, they're like, oh, yes. And so I did the review. That review came out, and so So sometimes people ask, okay, well, the courses you teach, are they ethnic studies courses? And I guess I would have to say that my courses for years have been very strongly influenced by ethnic studies, and sometimes get cross-listed with ethnic studies. But I don't have, like I haven't taught, an African American studies course. I've taken one, but I haven't taught one, or a Mexican American studies course. But within my courses, and my students will tell you this, there's a very strong ethnic studies undergrad.